Today's episode of Voiced is from r/Petty Revenge by I Know What I Have and is about a renter who embarks on an ambitious renovation project only to find himself in a surprising confrontation with his landlord's wife. How far will this renovation journey go before it takes an unexpected twist? Subscribe if you enjoy. I became a renter for the first time in my mid-30s, pretty late in life. Before that, I had been on the other side of things. I'm a landlord and developer, which I realize doesn't endear me to most readers, but in my partial defense, I've built everything that I own, and with my own hands for the first few years. I started doing painting, finishing carpentry, millwork, and cabinet making to make money during university, and when I graduated, I had saved up enough to get deeply into debt at an extremely high interest rate, which I had to build my way out of. The first place I lived in, after the dorm, was a dangerously neglected warehouse that I had just bought and ended up reconstructing into a fourplex. I lived there for the next 10 years while subsequently getting into new greenfield rental developments. Just before COVID, I ended up selling that first place I had built, and the buyer wanted me out so they could raise the rent to market. This was to be my first time getting evicted, but the pain was numbed by the sale price during that huge market run-up. I also thought it might be tricky to navigate being a tenant in a building that I had built and owned for years. I decided to treat myself by renting a condo downtown, a huge step up from my previous one-bedroom that was chosen for its return on investment rather than owner-occupancy appeal. I spent around 3 months looking at dozens of places and built up a good sense of the rental market, as my pride insisted I get the best deal possible. I quickly learned that the market that had been so favorable to me, the landlord, was extremely difficult for me, the tenant. I got incredibly lucky when I took a chance and viewed a condo on Craigslist that had no photos in the listing, never a good sign. It turned out the lack of photos was not an attempt to cover up, but simply the inability of the owner to work a digital camera. He did not have a smartphone. It was perfect. 2005-ish building, floor-to-ceiling glass, high floor with 270-degree views, air conditioning, open layout, well priced. The only problem? Very worn out, shabby 2005-ish kitchen and bathroom, and the reddest-looking cherry wood flooring you could imagine. Horrible cheap honey-colored fake wood veneer cabinets, gloss black appliances, brushed aluminum finish everywhere, lots of frosted glass on the light fixtures, a simpler time. The landlord seemed like he would be pretty hands-off, and my application pitch was that if he was okay with it, I would take care of maintenance myself and just e-transfer him rent every month and not bother him. He loved the sound of that. He said he had bought a house in the suburbs and wanted to keep this condo for rental income for about 10 years until he retired. There are pretty strong tenant rights where I live. So long as he didn't sell, there were no-fault eviction options. We signed the tenancy agreement, paid the deposit, and moved in. The last time I saw him was during the move-in inspection, after which he exclaimed, "If you treat this place well, I promise you can stay here as long as you want." Big, firm, job interview-winning boomer handshake, and he was gone. We loved the new place, a complete change from the up-and-coming part of town we had just left, 400 feet above the street. The absolutely horrible kitchen, bathrooms, and floors haunted me, but I had a plan, and it was only a matter of time. One of my carpentry millwork subcontractors did a lot of retail tenant improvement, as well as model homes and apartments for much bigger developers. When you are building a 30-story high-rise, you typically spend a few $100,000 to several million mocking up a unit in a retail showroom somewhere off-site to help you collect deposits. After the building sells out, that stuff gets either junked or sold on Craigslist. When I was doing single-digit unit buildings, I had bought a number of new old stock appliances, cabinets, flooring, etc., out of a marketing manager's garage for cash. A few months later, and it's the summer of 2020, and COVID is in full swing, and my carpenter emails me. One of his clients is canceling their project, and since they are ghosting him on his draw, he is taking down their display unit. The drawings show an almost exact match to my unit in terms of dimensions. The specification sheet is jaw-dropping. Almost 20 feet of Snydero cabinets, gloss white with champagne bronze hardware, Sub-Zero Wolf appliance package, white marble counters and backsplash, Callista faucets, easily over $100,000 retail, not including installation. Oh, and 1,200 square feet of herringbone light oak planks, if I don't mind pulling them up myself. How much does he want? $10,000 cash. Well, my job site is shut down for the foreseeable future. The government is making 75% of my payroll, and I don't have anything to do except stare at my awful kitchen all day. After about 3 hours with my measuring tape and pencil, I ask my carpenter if he is willing to join my bubble for $40 per hour cash for a few weekends. He is. One last step. Email my landlord and ask if he doesn't mind me doing a complete renovation on his condo. Crucially, I conclude the offer with, "I will undertake to return it to move-in condition before I leave." Not surprisingly, he accepts. "That's okay. Do whatever you want. We love having you as a tenant." Time to go to work. I get the old kitchen out in about 2 days, hampered by my need to work quietly as I'm doing this without permits, not like they are doing inspections anyways, but still. A side effect of this slow pace, and my wife's current obsession with Marie Kondo, is that everything is removed intact and carefully taped and labeled. Taking out the old kitchen does indeed spark joy. The old floating cherry wood floor comes up in a morning, also tagged and labeled and bundled in the order it was removed. The carpenter comes over, and he gets the new kitchen installed in less than 2 days while I lay down the floor. The floor actually ended up taking me a week, mainly because I had to make the end cuts at my storage unit across town, since I definitely couldn't run a miter saw with everyone at home during lockdown. After just under 2 weeks, I had effectively a brand new, ultra-high-end condominium for just under $12,000 out of pocket. At this point, I'm sure everyone reading this is facepalming as they wonder why on earth I'm proud of renovating someone else's condo at my cost. It did make sense at the time, as I was under the impression I'd be there for a good 10 years, plus the fact I was paying about $500 per month under market at move-in, and more like $1,500 per month under market in the current condition. There are a variety of economic and market conditions and segments where it makes more financial sense to rent than it does to buy. For example, my monthly rent would not have even covered the interest portion of a mortgage, let alone condominium fees, insurance, taxes, and the opportunity cost of the down payment. In other words, it was cheaper to rent the condominium than it was to rent the money that I would need to buy the condominium. Also, as a builder, cash is a critical tool, and the more cash I can hold on to, the bigger I can build. With my 1-year lease and the fact I had lots of free time, it didn't seem like such a reckless move. And who can say no to a $2,000 kitchen faucet? Filling a glass of water feels like working the bolt on a well-oiled Holland & Holland rifle. Worst case, I could probably get most of it back by selling just the appliances if something unexpected happened. Which it did. I had undertaken all this after evaluating all the possibilities and weighing the risk of putting time and money into a place I don't own. I had failed to consider one important detail: my wife. By the spring of 2023, the upgrades had, in my opinion, paid for themselves after nearly 36 months of use. I hadn't seen the landlord since I moved in, and he hadn't been in touch since approving my renovation, except for the monthly confirmation he'd accepted my rent transfer. So naturally, I began to get concerned when by the end of the first week of May, he hadn't deposited my rent. 2 emails went unanswered until there was a knock on the door. I opened up and was hit with a wall of flowery perfume, which perfectly matched the wall of floral print and red heels standing in my doorway. The landlord had contracted COVID in 2023 and sent his wife to collect the rent. I get out my phone to cancel the transfer and go into my office to look for my checkbook. I come back to find her, still in her heels, standing in the middle of the living room, spinning like a Technicolor top. "Oh wow, this looks fabulous. I heard you were doing some renovations, but I never thought it would look like this. Is that a Sub-Zero fridge?" She opens the fridge, my fridge. "I love the floors. And are these custom cabinets?" She turns the kitchen faucet on and off, probably 6 times. It took days to air out the smell of perfume after she left. Several hours later, my wife came home, and given the lingering smell in the apartment, I had already briefed her on who had stopped by. I can tell by the smell she's seeing dollar signs. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, I get a call from a realtor who wants to schedule the photographer to take listing photos as the landlords are selling. Of course, the landlord, who has now recovered from his COVID-19, will not take my calls and won't respond to my emails. I'm upset that he doesn't have the courage to admit what he is doing. My wife is upset because she doesn't want to move, and I'm feeling embarrassed that I trusted this guy. I'm not really losing much since we've lived there for 3 years and paid tens of thousands less than market rent during that time, but it still stings. Even in the slow market, the place sells in 3 weeks, and yes, the new owners want to move in. They give me the required 3 months' notice and pay the 1-month rent compensation. I note that the listing has advertised exquisitely renovated with top-of-the-line appliances, cabinets, and built-ins. No expense spared. My first instinct was to at least contact the realtor and suggest he check with the landlord about what was included with the apartment and what was being represented. But the description in the listing infuriated my wife to such an extent that we agreed to let them do their own due diligence. I think you can all guess where this is going. This time, it only took 3 days to pull the new kitchen out and put the old kitchen back in. Same with the floors. Turns out you can lay 1,000 square feet of flooring in about 2 hours if it's all pre-cut and labeled. But some of the tongue and groove was a bit loose, so I made sure to glue that down to the concrete nice and tight to make sure it doesn't creak or pop. It's exceptionally cheap, so it's going to splinter and separate if it ever needs to come back up. The old Home Depot Glacier Bay $49 kitchen faucet unfortunately started leaking when I put it back in, so I treated the new owners to a brand new replacement, now $60. The new one leaked as well, but not much, and only when it was on. I rewatched the move-in inspection video to refresh my memory and made sure everything was exactly as it was when I moved in, right down to a few small holes in the drywall. I had also forgotten that the old oven control board was fried, which meant it kept shutting off every 10 minutes. My wife and I debated leaving a wireless camera up on the wall to capture the new owner's delight at how faithfully we upheld our tenancy agreement, as unfortunately we moved out about a week before their planned move-in date. But there was still a reasonable chance of getting sued, so we opted not to, as intent is half the battle. I don't actually know what happened, since I've ignored the dozens of phone calls from the landlord and the new owners, and just sent them a registered letter with my tenancy agreement, move-in inspection video on DVD, and a copy of the email exchange with the landlord from 2020, where he allowed me to renovate the condominium, provided I put everything back the way it was when I moved in. I did get a text from the realtor calling me a petty, vindictive jerk, and that I'm lucky I'm not getting sued, implying that my landlord probably is getting sued, and furthermore, one or all of them has looked into suing me and were advised against it. The concierge recently told me that nobody has moved into the condo yet, which presents another intoxicating possibility, because the new owners evicted us for their personal use, according to the tenancy law. If they fail to move in within 6 months, they owe me a full year's rent as compensation for a fraudulent eviction. I still haven't bought a place. I ended up unfortunately having to pay a fair bit more in rent to move upstairs in the same building, with a different layout, but thankfully, much nicer finishings. I have an alert set for the building that tells me if a unit gets listed. I'm ready to make an offer if there is a fixer-upper that comes up for sale. I even have a kitchen that might just fit. Wow, what a roller coaster of events. This story hits on so many relatable themes: trust, the unpredictability of landlord-tenant relationships, and the lengths one might go to make a home genuinely livable. From the initial trust placed in the landlord, who promised stability, to the shocking twist of an unexpected eviction, it's clear that sometimes what seems like a generous agreement can turn sour. The protagonist's ambition to renovate the condo speaks volumes about their character, showcasing a desire not just to live in a space, but to improve and invest in it, only to have that hard work treated as a mere commodity by the landlord. The skillful DIY approach not only reflects their passion, but also emphasizes the risks of such an investment without ownership. And let's not forget the dramatic final act, restoring everything back to its original charm, in a calculated move that leaves a strong message about accountability. This saga raises important questions about landlord obligations, tenant rights, and the personal stories that shape our living situations. Has anyone else had similar experiences, triumphs, or pitfalls in rental scenarios? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. What do you think about the ethics of renovating a place you don't own? Let's discuss. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Voiced. If you enjoy daily, high-quality stories, please like and subscribe to show your support.